Hey guys, it's Pierre here. And today we're going to talk about Dragon Ball TCG and specifically this one topic that no one is talking about. Okay, no, actually everyone's talking about it. Today we're going to talk about Super Shenron. And specifically I want to talk about it in a way to contextualize it. Not everyone knows what Super Shenron is. Not every locals is devastated by this, what I consider to be a tier 0 deck. And I think it's important to go deep into where lies the bigger problems of the deck and what can we do to fix it, and are people's claims to how they would fix it legitimate. Tons of people, like I said, have talked about this. So Android, Eggman, Joey, the Four Corners podcast by No Counters, even the head judge of the ARG Springfield event, Cameron David Russell Williamson. I'm just going to call him CDRW from now on. He made a fantastic video on his perspective. I'll link all of those videos down in the description just so you can get a bigger context of what everyone is talking about. But I'm going to do a more holistic overview of what exactly the deck is, what the core is, and then why it's a problem and where can we go from here. So, Super Shenron, what specifically is the core of the deck? Well, first off, there's the leader. So the leader is like any other Shenron leader. He's gonna go to rest mode on his front side to go search up Dragon Balls, and then once you have second Dragon Balls, you can wish him to the other side. Unlike other wish leaders, he gets a Dragon Ball back in hand. So for most builds of the deck, you're just gonna go get a 0-cost Dragon Ball, draw another card. And then what he does on his front side is very similar to any other Black Shenron. He can use a Desire for free if he's got enough energy to use it. He can draw a card. And then his ultimate ability is you can take 20 cards from your deck. So these are 20 additional cards outside of the second Dragon Balls. So you can take 20 of them from drop and you can shuffle them into your deck and then take an extra turn, which is really powerful on a leader just because of how accessible that makes it. But before I get into the nitty and gritty, let's go through the rest of the deck. So we have the leader. Now, where the issues lies is primarily in the core engine of the deck. So that's specifically Bulma and Child's Wish. So what Bulma does, she's a 3-cost yellow card that when you play her, you can untap up to 2 energy, mill up to 2 cards, and then draw a card. All in all, not too bad. But then when you consider the fact that Child's Wish costs 2, can play a 3-drop at 15k or less, then you start thinking, okay, well, they're going to mill a bunch of cards, they're going to refresh that energy that Child's Wish cost them, and then they're going to be able to do that over and over by either having more Bulmas in the drop or by comboing away the ones on the board. And then you get into this loop where we're going over and over, very similar to what Storm was doing with 1-2 swap back in the heyday, where you're playing Bardock, you're swapping into Goten, swing with both, flute away Goten, play Bardock again, attack, swing with Goten, and your turns are just so energy efficient that you can go through these really long turns. To add to the mix, the deck runs Radar. So Dragon Radar allows you to either get balls or desire cards. In this situation, typically it'll probably end up being more Child's Wishes, so you can continue your loop going over and over until you're guaranteed to see your entire deck and have at least 20 cards in your drop to then take an extra turn. And that's the general core of the deck. You basically want to loop as many Bulmas and Child's Wishes as you can so that you can get as many 10k swings in as you can, and then you can be as efficient on energy and be able to prep your drop for when you want to take that extra turn. Now that shell in itself doesn't take up a huge amount of space. So there are lots of different variants of the deck right now. Specifically, people were playing Storm the first couple of weeks that was figured out, so that's your typical 1-2 swap engine with Miras and Double Strike. Then there's also the Height of Mastery is one of the biggest builds right now, and that just means building your way up to Path to Greatness. On turn 4, rest all your opponent's cards, and then once you take an extra turn at that point, you essentially have 4 guaranteed swings at your opponent where they're all tapped out and it swings for triple strike, which is an insane amount of aggression to push on your opponent. A similar variant doesn't use Super Shenron but uses the same core engine is the Scuffle Time Dende deck. So as opposed to using a Super Shenron to take the extra turn, So what you're doing is you're using Dende, the blue leader, to be able to use Fountain of Fate. I don't know, some fountain card that allows you to get this 2-drop Goten from World Martial Arts Tournament and play him for free. And then what he's effectively on the board is a dual attacker. So now you're doing that same typical loop where you're really being really efficient with your Bulmas and your Child's Wish, but also including there an extra loop of being able to constantly recur these Gotens and attack non-stop. And it's the same general idea of just being really hyper energy efficient. And this deck can consistently kill on turn 2. Finally, we have different variants, like things like there's Hand Destruction, where you're using the Child's Wish Bulma loop to constantly net energy to then keep using 1-star balls to try and diminish your opponent's hand. There's lots of different variants, but those are the first 3 are the biggest ones, and then you have a bunch of different offshoots ones that you can play with, which just goes to show the flexibility and the power of a deck that relies on the core of Bulma and Child's Wish. So we got to ask ourselves at this point, why is this a problem? Well, this is a problem for a lot of reasons, and my first one is because of time restrictions. You can imagine that going through a turn of milling yourself, untapping your energy, drawing cards, and doing this loop over and over again without even considering that you're attacking, you're comboing, your opponent's trying to defend themselves, and you have other plays like drawing more cards, looking through your deck with different searchers. You add up all those components together and you're looking at easily 20-minute turns, and that is just not viable. Like the head judge said about the ARG Springfield, we looked at a 2-hour untimed finals, and that's not even to mention that half the field was going to time every single round. And that's just, from a tournament standpoint, that's just unacceptable. It's unhealthy, and it really doesn't harbor a strong competitive nature. Aside from the fact that it's a huge time sink in a tournament scene, the deck, I will cleanly say, is tier 0. And it's not simply because we don't have answers, right? We do have things like Black Mask Saiyan or Striving to be the Best on Goku, Crisis Crusher, all these cards that are supposedly supposed to help us with stopping the rush of aggro and stopping these insane recurring plays. But at the end of the day, you still need to find those pieces. And unfortunately, we can't build decks where I have 12 pieces of Super Shenron hate main board, and then I'm not just losing automatically to other decks everywhere else. It creates a situation where you have 1-2 turns to find the answers you need, and then if you can't, well, then you're just going to get bombarded on. In addition to that, there is very low opportunity cost for a Super Shenron deck to include answers to answers, even main board. Like the previously mentioned Crisis Crusher, where it could help with the little 1-drops that they might put in. They just use that card themselves. And they go off and they pop your Borgos, they pop your Black Mask Saiyans. And really, there is just so many ways that they can tech in answers. Like right now, there's the promo Veku, where it's a 4-drop barrier version of a Borgos. Great, that's really hard to remove. But even then, we see sideboarding in the 3-drop Vegeta BR, which they'll just Child's Wish back and they'll KO your Veku. And then they continue with the loop over and over again. So we're really stuck in this situation where even if we have answers, it is so easy for these Super Shenron decks to include those answers within their own strategy without harming it too much that the deck is just hard to answer. And those answers need to come in the first 2 to 3 turns, which really puts the onus on the defending player to either have the nuts or just lose out. Now, my final reason is just because this deck's unfun. There have been polls on Facebook, on YouTube, many Discord and different discussion groups have been discussing about how long it is to play the deck, how long it is to endure it as the defending player. And when even the pilots of the decks aren't enjoying the strategy that they're deploying and they're just using it to win, at that point we clearly have a problem. And fun is a factor to look at when we're talking about should a deck be banned or not. The precedence is there with the original Storm, which Bandai had specifically said that when newer players come in to a local game shop and they play tournaments, getting swept turns 2 or 3 by a Storm deck just wasn't fun. It wasn't enjoyable. So there's that precedence there that it's something to look into. And at the end of the day, this is a card game. And I'm a competitive player. I love going to tournaments. I love putting everything on the line to see if I can win it big. I advocate trying to adapt. I think it's super important. But we can't forget that this is a game. The reason I've chosen this thing to try and be really good at, to be competitive in, to give it my all and put it on the line is because I enjoy what I'm doing. So a big part of it is just the deck is just really not that great to play. Nor is it great to play against. And that kind of environment makes me not really miss it when we're considering maybe having an answer for it. So with that, let's segue into proposed fixes. What have people been talking about? How can we fix it? So unsurprisingly, ban all the things has been kind of where a lot of people have been at. You know, every single card from ban Radar because that's what's letting them extend to the moon. Ban Bulma because she's the card people are recurring over and over again. Ban Super Shenron. An extra turn is stupid. Because it is. What's the last one? Ban Child's Wish. There is some merit to that. And I think some of these cards probably do take up way too much space design-wise. For Child's Wish, for example, I think the fact that it encompasses every 3-drop or less under 15k takes away a lot of design space for different cards that Bandai can use, and it also means that the effects need to be very restricted. Because in a vacuum, I think Bulma's just fine. I don't think there's really an issue in her build. She's actually pretty balanced. The consideration is that, okay, well, you're going to play her at 3 energy, and then she's going to get you these cute effects, and she's only going to cost you 1. So she's effectively a 1-cost card, but you need to wait till turn 3 to be able to accrue that advantage. And you're not netting any energy, you're not net neutral in energy, you're net negative in energy. And that's where Child's Wish break things, because in lots of card games, so we saw this tons of times in Magic, in Hearthstone, anytime we have cards that manipulate cost, that cheat on the resource foundation that the entire game is built on top of, that's where we're bound to have issues. And that's where Child's Wish tends to be one of the biggest offenders, because we're looking at a 2 energy play to play 3 energy things. And those cards are balanced around costing 3 energy. So this is where the biggest issue lies, in my opinion. Since we brought up my opinion, what is my opinion on it? And what would I do? Well, personally, I think we leave Bulma as is. Bulma's okay. Really, before any Child's Wish looping, she really wasn't doing much. And you have to consider that instead of banning everything around an issue, why don't we just ban the issue? In that same context, Radar's a very good card, don't get me wrong. Because at worst, Radar's a draw 2 in most decks. And that is, you know, at worst, draw 2, pretty good. But at the end of the day, when you consider the fact that you have a restriction of being a wish leader and you have a restriction of having a bunch of balls in your deck, I think that when we take away the broken things that this core engine does, Radar is just good to have and not necessarily broken. It's only as broken as the pieces it's recurring. And here's where I think we should make the changes. So if we're trying to go for like the minimalist of changes, we're trying to change as little as possible to try and hinder the deck without skewering any off-meta Shenron decks or without trying to completely destroy local strategies that rely on Child's Wish. I think we take Child's Wish and we errata it to being a hard once per turn. You cannot activate Child's Wish more than once per turn. And I think this would do a lot in terms of just stopping this deck specifically. Because then no matter how much you're trying to get Child's Wishes into your hand, you're only going to be able to cast once per turn. Which means that you can still do a lot of powerful things. You can still net a lot of card draw, a lot of energy efficient plays by even just having the one. Like it's surprising how far you can get with just one Child's Wish. And by not outright limiting the card or banning it, you're not blowing away other strategies. Like, I know everyone, I don't know how many people love Shenron Veggies, but that deck hinders a lot on Child's Wish because you're trying to get your Kabbas and trying to play them as much as you can. And there's a lot of other similar strategies that rely on Child's Wish that if we just get rid of it, you're killing those. And I think if we're trying to make as minimal as an impact as we can, which I think should be our goal. Bans and limited lists should fix what's broken, while not trying to overbear and touch on everything else. The card, from a design flaw, is very open. It does a lot, it captures a lot, and I wouldn't be surprised to see it gone. But if we're trying to limit it so that this deck doesn't go crazy and all the variants of the Bulma Child's Wish core, well then yeah, I just say we make it once per turn, and that's really the only fix I see we need to make to really pull back this deck. Now, if we're just trying to say, okay, like let's cleanly get rid of the issue and not make, you know, any two guesses about it, I say we just ban Super Shenron. Super Shenron can do a lot of cool things. I think when it was first revealed, there were a lot of ideas of, oh, well, maybe if I play this huge combo deck, maybe I can on turn 5 make a setup that usually I can't, because I can take an extra turn, go into turn 6 and do my plays, like maybe a Universe 11 deck, for example. However, I think at the end of the day, we have to realize that an extra turn is really powerful. And you can do it in a balanced fashion. Magic has done it. Hearthstone has done it in a way that, yeah, extra turn decks are powerful, but they can typically be aggroed down, or they can be pushed in a way that they can't just go off. That's where having the extra turn on a leader is a problem. It's not that hard to get 20 cards in your drop. And at the end of the day, I think the accessibility of having extra turn on the leader is way too much. It is too accessible where it is placed within the deck to be balanced. I think you give us like Whis. Whis is, you know, Whis isn't playable, but Whis is a way of seeing, okay, we can do these powerful things, but not busted. You know, and if we're trying to make a meta relevant version of an extra turn card, you know, maybe it costs 5 or 6, and maybe it says you can't do XYZ on your extra turn, for example. So I think banning Super Shenron, we won't really miss much. We're really early into this set's release. Like, yeah, we've been in a few tournaments now where they've been legal. It's been like a month and a half or so. But there have been no Bandai specific events for a while that use them. And I think at the end of the day, we wouldn't be missing out on much. I would try and go for like the most minimum fix possible. But if we're just trying to cleanly cut any issues guaranteed, I think you should also ban Super Shenron, just because its ability is really powerful on a leader that at no point would that be used and not be degenerate. So at the end of the day, that's really what it comes down to. We have a engine that loops over and over and over again in a really energy efficient way that lets you see your whole deck and basically makes it so your opponent isn't really playing because they have too low energy resources and cards in hand to really deal with everything you're doing. And in the case of like the Height of Mastery version, even if they have 3 to 4 energy on board, once you bring down Height of Mastery, you're just tapping their energy anyways, making it so that it doesn't really matter what they're doing. So that's basically where we're at. That's an overview. That for those of you who are not sure about Super Shenron, this is what it is. This is what it's doing. This is why everyone's yelling. And I can agree with Joey when I think it's toxic. I don't think it's healthy for the game, and I think it won't be missed. Honestly, if it wasn't for Super Shenron, I think we'd be in one of the best metas ever. In a place where you could really almost play anything, and if you're a good pilot, you're going to get some amount of results. So I really do hope Bandai does something about this, because I think if this deck gets answered, we're going to be in a really good place. Yeah. All right. Well, as usual, I'm Aspira. Feel free to like, comment, sub, do all the YouTube-y things. And I'll see you on the next one. Ciao.